The New World Order Exposed, written in 2003 by Victor Thorn, dedicated to Peter Carenti for leading me along the proper path, and Lisa Giuliani for spreading the word. The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. President John F. Kennedy, Yale University, June 11th, 1962. Chapter 1. Introduction. Whenever the truth starts to surface about what is really going on in the world, the corporate-run mass media always marginalizes this information by calling it a conspiracy theory. But as you read this book, please remember, something does not remain a theory once it's proven to be true. The information contained within this book is factual, and what makes it even more damning is that most of it comes from the very mouths of those who most want to conceal it from the public. The New World Order Exposed will not only bring to light the high crimes of those who rule the world by pulling strings behind the scenes, but it also shows a psychological element of the way they think. By continually setting one segment of society against another, their tried and true divide and conquer tactics, the controllers want us to continually fight against one another instead of focusing our attention on the real enemy, them. I realize that this book may be daunting due to its size, but all I can ask of you is this. Read one chapter a day, and in less than 3 months, I guarantee your outlook on life will be dramatically different. In fact, I guarantee your outlook on life will be dramatically different. In fact, I promise that it will be. What you'll come to realize is that we are systematically being lied to on a daily basis, and that certain forces lurking behind the scenes are making decisions that are not in the American people's best interests. If we fail to not only expose these nefarious individuals, but to also eradicate them from our government, our lives will be substantially different in the near future. It's time to take action and to take back our country. Hopefully this book will be a first step. Victor Thorn, Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, January 13th, 2003. Section 1, 9/11. Chapter 1, 40 reasons that suggest the controllers knew about the 9/11 terrorist attacks but did nothing to stop them. I am deeply indebted to two individuals for the following article. Russ Kick, who wrote September 11, 2001, no surprise, in the 2002 edition of the Loom Panic's main catalog, and Christopher Bolin, who wrote Former Top German Spy Says U.S. Wrong About September 11 in the January 28, 2002 edition of the American Free Press. Both articles are incredibly eye-opening and are used as the basis of what follows. In the opening paragraph of his article, Russ Kick says, the U.S. has the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, the Secret Service, and a host of other intelligence and security agencies. These agencies employ Echelon, which monitors the majority of electronic communication in the world, Carnivore, which intercepts email, Tempest, a technology that can read a computer monitor's display from over a block away, keyhole satellites that have a resolution of 4 inches, and other spy technologies, probably most of which we don't know about. In 2001, the U.S. spent $30 billion on intelligence gathering and an additional $12 billion on counterterrorism. With all these resources and more, we're supposed to believe that the government didn't have the slightest inkling that terrorists were planning to attack the United States much less hijack planes and send them careening into major landmarks. After you read the following list of examples, you'll know that the controllers not only knew about the 9/11 attacks, but also allowed them to happen. In its second annual report issued on September 12, 2000, the Advisory Panel to Assess Domestic Response Capabilities for Terrorism involving weapons of mass destruction said, "We are impelled by the stark realization that a terrorist attack on some level inside our borders is inevitable." There were similar reports released by the Congressional Research Service September 10, 2001, and the National Security Commission, which was sponsored by the Department of Defense on both September 15, 1999 and March 15, 2001. After the attacks, CIA Director George Tenet acted surprised, yet on February 2, 2000, he gave a speech warning that Osama bin Laden is still foremost among terrorists because of the immediacy and seriousness of the threat he poses. Andreas von Bülow, former head of the parliamentary commission that watches the German Secret Service, stated, "The planning of the attacks was technically and organizationally a master achievement. To hijack 4 huge airplanes within a few minutes and within 1 hour drive them into their targets with complicated flight maneuvers is unthinkable without years of support from state intelligence services." Less than 2 hours after the attack, London's Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper reported, "Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he would attack American interests in an unprecedented attack." One must conclude that if the writers at a British newspaper knew about these attacks, why didn't the Secret Service? After the 4 planes were hijacked, why were our military fighter planes kept on the ground for over an hour, for over 60 whole minutes, when this time was so crucial? The State Department issued a strict warning for worldwide caution on September 7, 2001, 4 days before the attacks, specifically saying Americans may be the target of a terrorist threat from extremist groups with links to Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda organization. The Airjet Airline World News reported on June 23, 2001, U.S. airlines may be a terror risk over the next 3 days. They were 2.5 months off, but they knew something was awry. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown was supposed to fly from his San Francisco home to New York City on the morning of September 11, 2001. The night before, at 10:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which would be 1:00 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, he received a phone call from his security people at the airport. Mayor Brown subsequently canceled his flight. And guess what? He lived. Over 3,000 other people without insider information weren't so lucky. During the week before the attacks, stock traffic for American Airlines, United, plus an assortment of associated insurance companies rose 1,200% to the tune of over $15 billion. The London Times, September 27, 2001, reported, "The author, Salman Rushdie, believes that U.S. authorities knew of an imminent terrorist strike when they banned him from taking internal flights in Canada and the United States only a week before the attacks. The FAA told the author's publisher that U.S. intelligence had given a warning of something out there, but failed to give further details." The FBI knew about certain terrorists learning to fly planes within the U.S. On 2 occasions, they asked the Amman Flight School vice president about these terrorists at his school, once in 1999 and the other time in August 2001. they learned that one specific terrorist, Zacarias Moussaoui, only wanted to learn how to steer the plane while it was flying and didn't care about taking off or landing it. The supposed terrorist ringleader, Mohammed Atta, reported his passport stolen many months before the attack. Miraculously, all of a sudden it appeared atop the burning rubble of the World Trade Center towers. And guess what? It was in pristine condition. 7 of the 19 hijackers listed by the FBI are actually still alive. They were misidentified. Our Secret Service supposedly knew nothing about these attacks, but less than 2 days after they occurred, they had a complete list of the suicide flyers. 10 days before the attacks, French intelligence warned the FBI about Muslim pilot connections to potential terrorist attacks. In June 2001, 3 Middle Easterners were arrested by federal protective officers in New York City after photographing federal buildings. They took pictures of surveillance cameras, security checkpoints, and police posts. Surprisingly, these men were let go, even though the New York Post reported on September 16, 2001, that anxious authorities expressed concerns that plans for terror attacks were underway. A few suspicions. Here is an excruciatingly complex plan to hijack planes and run them into symbolic American landmarks. It obviously took years of dedication and planning. So what do the terrorists do? They make all their transactions via credit card under their own names. Also, they gave their flight instructors their real names and conveniently forgot flight manuals written in Aramaic in their rent-a-car. With this in mind, Andreas von Bülow, mentioned earlier, says 95% of the work of intelligence agencies around the world is deception and disinformation. But our Secret Service says they had no idea this group of terrorists was going to strike. Yet the leads they left, see the above listed examples, were similar to the tracks left by a herd of stampeding elephants. Rather convenient, huh? Mohammed Atta, the brains behind the operation, was under CIA watch from January to May 2000, while he lived in Frankfurt, Germany. Yet the CIA said they had no inkling he was involved with terrorism, even after he started taking flight lessons. The CIA claimed they caught a jubilant phone call from Osama bin Laden after the attacks. Yet they also said they couldn't monitor him beforehand. Why not? Was it a miracle that they were suddenly able to tune into him? The Washington Times reports that a senior administration official told them that on September 10, 2001, U.S. intelligence intercepted a call from an Osama bin Laden follower to the al-Qaeda discussing an imminent big attack. Earlier in the year, they also heard a call referring to Hiroshima. German intelligence was also listening to the terrorists. CNN reported on October 2, 2001, German intelligence services intercepted a phone call on September 11 after the terrorist attacks on the U.S., in which the followers of Osama bin Laden applauded the deadly assaults. So they were miraculously able to suddenly tune into that frequency also. The British government noted, in 2 interviews broadcast on U.S. television in 1997 and 1998, Osama bin Laden referred to the terrorists who carried out the earlier attacks on the WTC in 1993 as role models. A British government report, October 4, 2001, entitled Responsibility for the Terrorist Atrocities in the U.S. said, in August and early September, close associates of bin Laden were warned to return to Afghanistan from other parts of the world by September 10. In Counterpunch magazine, September 12, 2001, Alexander Cockburn and Jeffrey St. Clair reported that security at the WTC was considerably heightened 3 weeks prior to 9/11. For the first time ever, sniffer dogs were used and all trucks admitted into the WTC were thoroughly searched. Florida Governor Jeb Bush, George W.'s brother, called up the state National Guard on September 7, 2001, 4 days before the attacks, for no specific reason except the potential massive damage to life and property that may result from an act of terrorism at a Florida port, and the necessity to protect life and property from such acts of terrorism. Under Section 3. Do you think he knew something we didn't know? The FBI embarked upon a massive interrogation of people in New York City who had foreknowledge of a terrorist attack on 9/11. Especially Arab Americans. The Journal News of Westchester, New York reported on October 11, 2001 that a long-standing New York policeman said so many people in the city spoke up about an upcoming catastrophe that the number of leads turning up was so overwhelming that it was difficult to tell who had heard about the attacks from secondhand sources and who had heard it from someone who had been a participant. Children in 3 different parts of the country spoke specifically and with startling accuracy about an impending attack on the World Trade Center in New York City. Each of them proved to be correct. Saddam Hussein instructed his army to be on its highest state of alert 2 weeks before the attacks, something Iraq hadn't done since the Gulf War. Hussein went into hiding in his underground bunkers at the same time for no apparent reason. Think about it. Why should he do this? There weren't any wars going on and no one was attacking Iraq. Do you mean to tell me that he, yet not one person in the U.S. Secret Service, knew beforehand about the WTC attack? The Russian media clamored with reports about an attack that would take place in America and prompted citizens to trade dollars for Russian currency. Dr. Alexander Nemitz writes about this phenomenon for Newsmax on September 17, 2001 in an article entitled Experts Russian Knew in Advance Encourage Citizens to Cash Out Dollars. Dr. Tatiana Koryagina, who is employed by the Russian Ministry of Economic Development, told Pravda on July 12, 2001, the U.S. has been chosen as the object of financial attack because the financial center of the planet is located there. The effect will be maximal. The strike waves of economic crisis will spread over the planet instantly and will remind us of the blast of a huge nuclear bomb. David Shippers, a lawyer who led impeachment hearings against President Clinton, repeatedly tried to warn John Ashcroft, members of Congress, Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert, and the Senate Intelligence Committee that Islamic madmen were planning to attack the United States. No one listened. Why not? On September 14, 2001, 3 days after the attacks, the German newspaper Neue Presse told of an Iranian man who was being held in Hanover, Germany. He said that he told the United States Secret Service of an impending terrorist act that would happen the week of September 10th. Then, only hours prior to the attack, he tried to fax President Bush with this news, but was forbidden the opportunity. London's Daily Telegraph reported that 2 senior Mossad experts, Israel's version of the CIA, were dispatched to Washington, D.C. in August 2001 to tell the CIA and FBI of the existence of a cell of as many as 200 terrorists said to be preparing a big operation. According to the Washington Times, September 16, 2001, the Russian Secret Service urged American authorities on numerous occasions that an attack was in the making. Nikolai Patrushev, head of the FSB, an updated version of the KGB, told the Times, "We had clearly warned them, but those in positions of power did not pay the necessary attention." A direct quote from Russ Kick. According to the highly respected German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, members of German intelligence confirmed that U.S., UK, and Israeli intelligence agencies had indeed picked up on the plot by Muslim terrorists to hijack jetliners and crash them into U.S. landmarks. The author continues, using the global snooping system of Echelon, these countries knew 6 months in advance about the 9/11 attacks. Washington Times headline, 9/13/2001. Echelon gave authorities warning of attacks. A direct quote from Russ Kick about Project Bojinka. Quote, authorities in the Philippines uncovered Project Bojinka, the radical Muslim plot to ram hijacked jets into American landmarks and to blow up 11 U.S. airliners in 2 days. They turned over this information to the FBI. The Washington Post adds on September 23, 2001, in an article entitled Borderless Network of Terror, watching the attacks in New York and Washington unfold on television earlier this month, an investigator gasped, "It's Bojinka. We told the Americans everything about Bojinka. Why didn't they pay attention?" The CIA knew. David Welna of National Public Radio Morning Edition show on the day of the attacks, as the Capitol building was being cleared, reported, quote, I spoke with Congressman Ike Skelton, a Democrat from Missouri and a member of the Armed Services Committee, who said that just recently the director of the CIA warned there could be an attack, an imminent attack on the United States of this nature. So this is not entirely unexpected. The World Trade Center attacks were a precursor to the war in Afghanistan for 4 primary reasons. 1, huge oil reserves in Russia's Caspian territory. 2, illegal drug trafficking. 3, a loss of rights under the guise of Homeland Security. 4, profits for those who benefit from the war machine. I'd like to augment this brief explanation with a quote from Christopher Boland's above-mentioned article. Quote, the image of the new enemy comes from Zbigniew Brzezinski's and Samuel Huntington, 2 policymakers of American intelligence and foreign policy. Already in the 1990s, Huntington believed people in Europe and the U.S. needed someone they could hate. This would strengthen their identification with their own society. And Brzezinski, the Mad Dog, as advisor to President Jimmy Carter, campaigned for the exclusive right to the U.S. to seize all the raw materials of the world, especially the oil and gas. In his analysis of political processes, von Bülow said, a global map of civil wars and conflicts coincides with the locations of strategic minerals. The same is the case with the third map, nodal points of the drug trade. The huge raw material reserves of the former Soviet Union, as well as the pipeline routes, are now at the disposal of the United States and Britain. In the end, we have to ask ourselves this question. Why did it take Christopher Boland and Russ Kick to compile this information and not Dan Rather, Rush Limbaugh, the New York Times, or Peter Jennings? We have to start seriously asking ourselves, what kind of information are we being fed?